Good morning. My name is Gordon Farmer. I'm a graduate student at Arizona State University with the Sanford School. My presentation is on non-traditional sexual orientations of coaches and student athletes in an educational setting. It's important aspect of our lives as we leave home and start becoming more independent when we enter into the collegiate ranks, and especially those of athletes and coaches, with the importance of social media. A lot of these athletes and coaches are put under the spotlight for all to view, and society is becoming more aware of the different aspects that are associated with sexual orientations in dealing with athletes and coaches. In a time we have following, we'll touch base on certain aspects that I feel that are relative and very important at a collegiate setting. In dealing with sexual orientations in the educational setting, there are three prominent aspects I want to touch base with. The first one is dispel of beliefs, and those related to sexual orientation and dealing with student athletes and coaches at the collegiate level, the coming out process, and the dealings that individuals have when they decide to come out at a certain time, and the acceptance. The acceptance aspect is dealing with heterosexual individuals getting over their homophobia, stigmas, and beliefs. And with these three aspects, we'll just touch base slightly on it, or this video would probably be 7 hours long and everybody would be confused. But I'll try and do what I can to implement what I've learned in my studies, in my readings, in relation to the sexual orientations in an educational setting as per student athletes and coaches. In order to dispel beliefs about non-traditional sexual orientations, we have to understand a couple basic concepts. It's not contagious, and it's not provocable. If you sit next to somebody who may have a same gender preference, it doesn't mean that it's gonna rub off on you if they sweat on you and you're gonna become a gay or a lesbian. A person can't be provoked into. Nobody can make you have those feelings for another individual. It's not like a communicable disease. There's people that will sit next to you that you have no idea that they may have that same-sex gender preference, and there's people that you may think are, but they relatively aren't. Those are the facts that we need to get over. Not all female athletes or coaches prefer the same-sex gender partners. It's been a myth for a long time that if you're masculine and you're a female, that you are pretty much a member of the lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer questioning community. As we move along in life, and the older we get, especially at the collegiate level, you'll see that there's certain sports that pretty much are aimed towards, directed towards the stereotyping, which we'll get into here in a little bit. But it seems like the outdoor sports, the softball, possibly track, um, lacrosse, soccer, the females, the athletes are playing in an outside environment. It's not so much as a swimming pool or gymnastics. Um, you're going to deal with elements of weather, this and that, and with the female populace of the LGBTQ community that I've dealt with, it's been explained to me that if you're going to play outside and get dirty, somebody's going to consider you a man or a boy or a lesbian. Here we are with the aspect of stereotyping. Stereotyping in the past and even present has been dictated through women's sports for an abundance of time. Um, it doesn't mean that you prefer the same sex gender for a partner. If you have short hair, if you coach softball, if you coach basketball, if you coach soccer, if you're masculine, it doesn't mean that you belong to that community either. But there's a direct correlation with sports and female athletes with the LGBTQ community. There comes a time when you look at somebody because they may be athletic, they may have short hair, they may be, well, back to masculine, they may be a pretty tough character. It doesn't mean that they like women also. On the other hand, if there's a man that is in gymnastics or if he's a cheerleader, that he is kind of feminine, it doesn't mean that he prefers men over women either. It's just the general stereotyping that's been dictated throughout the course of many, many years before us and after us that society has a problem with. The coming out process involves a decision for the person of interest to present their sexual orientation in today's society, and it weighs a heavy burden with the majority of these individuals. Um, the people we're talking about from the LGBTQ community, and you can say that either way, the LG or LB, there's no real specific way to present that community. They're all acceptable as of late. There's also another Q at the end of it. The Q at the end at first is for queer. The second Q is for questioning, which is a whole nother aspect. If the person does choose to expose their sexual orientation, they're most likely going to face discrimination, be chastised, possibly health risks related to it, stress related. Some of them find self satisfaction when they finally do come out. In the aspect of acceptance, we're generally looking at the promotion of information in regards to the LGBTQ community in a positive manner in hopes that it will enable a more acceptable environment between one community and another community. If heterosexual individuals could be made aware of the actualities in relations to the community of the LGBTQ, they can work in unison with these individuals at any level. Could be teammates, classmates. If we go to the coaches, you're looking at fellow faculty members, fellow coaches, as well as your student athletes. In dealing with stigma as related to the LGBTQ community, there's a few aspects that come into play. That of geographic regions, so to speak. These processes of these stigmas vary depending on if the individuals are coming from a rural or an urban area. You know, of course, we all know the small town populace may not be as acceptable as the metropolitan cities may be if a person is openly gay or lesbian. That the critical part for the individuals involved is they're forming identity, but they're basing how they feel about themselves according to the stigmatization that's been there for a long time. What they're doing is they're becoming aware of who they are and what they represent. And this is a critical time because it's when they're forming their identity. And this is usually taking place when they get to the collegiate level. sexual orientation has no significant effect on abilities of an athlete, strategic choices of a coach. It it deals with the coaching staff and the athletes being the best that they can be. And when individuals from this oppressed community, such as the LGBTQ community, when they start coming into the spotlight, more and more people view them in such a manner because of the social media nowadays that any move a person makes, it's going to be notified and presented across the World Wide Web within a matter of minutes. The support that these groups get from each other in their immediate social circle will depend on how they interact and how they perform. But their gender preference has nothing to do with how good or how bad they are. The borders that have been incorporated between the heterosexual community and the LGBT community are slowly coming down. Um, Several acquaintances that I have made over the recent years has allowed myself to try and expand my horizons and promote the fact that a person's sexual orientation has no bearance on what type of person they really are. Um, in a recent study I did with an individual who, in the state of California, was one of the first couples to become married. She was an educator. She was a coach. Her famous quote was, "Ignorance breeds fear of contamination." And if we can become more educated, as I've mentioned, we can cross these borders, eliminate them, and move on with our life in society. Although the stigma of being in the LGBTQ community is disappearing as more and more athletes and coaches are becoming more comfortable with coming out, our society is starting to accept this community with each passing day. Social policy has always dictated that there still needs to be a lot of change. Cultural homophobia is decreasing every day, but it's still there. If we can get to a point to where these changes can emerge, these gender borders can be more blurred, and a person's sexual orientation won't be so prominent in the relationships that are given. In the years to come, hopefully we can create a unity between an oppressed community such as that of the LGBTQ and a standard heterosexual. If we can work together to solve the indifferences between the two communities, it'll be a much easier transition as we enter into adulthood. If we can modify the existing beliefs of homophobia and the stigmatizations that are associated with being a gay or lesbian, we will create a more unified environment. If we can accept certain aspects of things we are not familiar with, such as a gay or a lesbian, or someone's social circle that we have no knowledge of, we get into these diverse groups, which, as we all know, diversity. As I come to the conclusion of my presentation in dealing with non-traditional sexual orientations of coaches and student athletes in an educational setting, we've covered concepts such as dispelling beliefs, the coming out process, and the acceptance of society in when dealing with an oppressed group such as the LGBTQ community. We've dealt with the stereotyping that's involved, the health issues that are related to persons of that community in relation to their coming out, the stigmas that are related to student athletes because of their dress, their masculinity, their haircut, the stigma also of certain coaches and what ramifications they deal with. We've dealt with the unity and what possibilities need to be instilled in the future in order to where we can make one cohesive unit no matter what your sexual orientation is. I've enjoyed this process and I hope you guys do as well. Thank you.